G'day, and welcome to Rehabilitating the Dark Elves Part 3. You might have noticed it's been a while since Part 2. There are reasons for this. These miniatures have a remarkable amount of nooks and crannies, and because I aim for neatness, and there are 25 or so in this unit, it's taken quite a few evenings to get through them all. That, and I took on a course of study over the past few months, and that took up many an evening as well. And while I was at it, I was down by a couple of key personnel in my day job, so I've been doing their jobs as well as my own. And while we were at all of that, some kindly soul posted the PDF for the old Warhammer Townscape, so I took it upon myself to print all that lot out and assemble the bloody lot of them. That took a little while. And while that was going on, Victory at Sea was re-released. It's a Mongoose Games World War II naval combat game, which I'd collected a fleet for years ago and then waited several years for them to re-release the rules into something more playable. Now released by Warlord Games, so of course I had to buy the starter box and the fleet for that and assemble all those up. And while that was going on, Battlefront released another World War III book for the United States, so I had to buy a whole bunch of the shiny new toys for that army as well and assemble all those up. And that's about where my excuses pucker out. Anywho, I'm now done, and I have some observations. Now, I'm used to buying everything new on sprue. This lot, these were assembled before I bought them, and they're undercoated. And they're unfamiliar miniatures. I hadn't painted any Dark Elves before. So even after I cleaned them up, there were still various bits of sprue nub, basically where the piece had been taken off and they hadn't cleaned up the piece properly. So there's residue sprue sticking out of the miniature. So I missed a few of those because I didn't really know what I was looking out for. Whereas if I'd cut them off the sprue myself, I would have cleaned up the bits as I went along. And by the time I found the bits that I'd missed, I was already partway through painting, and I didn't want to muck about with scraping paint off and repainting and that sort of thing, so I just accepted them as they are. Now my takeaway tip for this is that if you're assembling miniatures, clean up all the bits as soon as you cut them off of the sprue and before you assemble the miniature, because you're much more likely to find all the funny bits doing it that way than you are after you've assembled it and then go back looking for your errors. The result will be much neater. Observation number 2. I wanted a grittier look, grittier than the average elf, and that's what I got. It worked okay on the crossbow. I did this unit first. In fact, it's the only unit I've done so far. And it worked okay. And it still seems to work okay on the main block of Corsairs. Now, previously I've painted up a few high elves in my time, but also a shed load of wood elves. And this dark and kind of human level of grittiness seems a bit jarring at first. But you know what, I kind of like it. And they're my miniatures, so there. Observation number 3 is these miniatures. They look gritty at the front, but they're all lovely shiny blue dragon cloak at the back. Now I considered leaving the spines on the cloaks blue, and I did a couple of test pieces that way, and that's correct from a Earth-centric zoological perspective, because the average crocodile will have ridges down its back, but those ridges are the same colour as the rest of its skin. But it looked a bit bland, and the miniatures are already quite dark, So I did the spines as though they were horns, or basically the same method I'd use for teeth or horns on demons, variations thereof. Took a bit longer, but it brightens up the whole unit, makes them look pretty. And you know, it took a little bit of time, but when you consider how long the overall unit took, it wasn't much more of a percentage. And you can see the difference in how this unit looks from the back. And it brightens it right up. The opponent won't see a lot of that, but that's okay. I'm looking at my own miniatures here. Observation number 4. Now, you might recall from when I was banging on in the first video about how you have your main colour scheme and then you have highlight colours or accent colours and the like. The accent colour is yellow for this army. The primary colour is black with brown leather and blue cloaks and blue animals, but their clothing is black and the accent colour is yellow. But what I found was that yellow was extremely limited on this unit due to the pieces not offering many opportunities to do anything in yellow. They just didn't have the parts on them in the same way that the crossbows do. So crossbows have swords, and you can do the handle of the sword in yellow and a couple of other bits. So I did, however, use a fair bit of gold. So gold is now becoming the highlight colour in the way that yellow was intended to. But the black with yellow highlight colour worked very well on the banner in standard. Let's get a good angle on that. And that's the look that I was really looking for. So the concept still seems to be viable overall. Observation number 5. Black. To highlight black or not highlight black? More of a question than an observation. Now on the crossbows, it was a clear choice to not do grey or blue highlights to the few sections of black cloth. The black is supposed to be neutral and keep an overall darker tone to the army. The other colours could stand out more from the rest of what's going on. The Corsairs, however, have a lot more black than what the crossbows have. So I decided not to highlight for the same reasons that I didn't for the crossbow. This means that I save a lot of time as a trade-off, really, for having less texture on the insides of the cloaks. Now, I've seen some great colour texturing of cloak lining on other armies, including the army book, and the opportunity is certainly there in the sculpt to go to town getting the maximum texture out of those cloaks. But I'm time poor, I'm overcommitted with hobby projects as it is, and this is a second-hand rescue army which has got a mixture of brand new pieces and, you know, some reasonably good nick like this, but also some which are complete tatters. So I think it's more important to actually get an outcome of a completed army than it is to lavish detail on each miniature. As a tabletop unit, I reckon that'll do. So I'll move these fellas out of the way. Move him out of the way. That's 25 of these, not 24, but here we go. This is them, this is what they look like. Now, I'm firmly convinced, and I'm sure I've read somewhere, that the key to a good tabletop army is actually neatness. All the bells and whistles like highlighting, it's good to have, but when looking at it from 3 feet away, what makes all the difference is that there's no wacky bits of paint splotches and things that are out of position. And all the other stuff, all the golden demon, fancy pants stuff, will follow nicely enough if you get the fundamentals right. I should get myself a turntable for these display pieces. If I do decide to add highlights to the black later, I can always paint over the top of the varnish. I use a fairly thin spray on matte varnish, so I can come back to it if needs be, but I don't think I'll bother. For now, I'm calling this done, so I can move on to more units. So, what units? I'm glad you asked. I now have 2 core units, so it's time for a leader. So I'll paint up this this classic figure. And so I think it's Malkeith's mummy from memory, but either way she will make a perfectly good mage. And the other unit, something for flavour. There it is. Some of these units need a little more rehabilitation than others. So I'm going to drop these in a pot of methylated spirits, clean them up, reassemble, and I'll check in again in a few weeks with the results. In the meantime, feel free to hit the like or subscribe buttons, or check out parts 1 and 2 of this series, or some of the battle reports that we've been doing over the last year or so. Thanks for watching. I think it's time to call it a day.